quick introduction to everyone. Thanks so much for coming to another Showcase Your Craft. We've got at least 3 speakers today, if not possibly more. So I'm super excited to show you what people are building on Craft. And I think, Magnus, seeing as you were supposed to be at the previous one and we couldn't quite make it, I'd love it if you wanted to go first. And I'm really excited to see what you've come up with your craft too. So I'll leave it over to you. And yeah, just know that in the meantime, if you need anything, you can reach out. I'll be here.
Okay, thanks, Tom. It's nice of you to invite me. Hey, everyone. Quite fantastic to get faces on some of the wonderful people in the craft community, in the Slack community. Excellent. What I've done is that what I do for work, it often involves putting together proposals, and both internally and externally. And since a long time back, I worked with the Amazon Memo format, or an adapted version of it. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's quite amazing feat of kind of invention, because already in 2004, Jeff Bezos forbade everyone to use PowerPoint at Amazon. And the reason for this is quite, extremely rational. I mean, we're all being on the receiving end of death by PowerPoint. But that was not really the reason. He was really specifically rational, or his S team, I should say. He was not the only one, and he was specifically not the only one in developing the format. The reason was that they realized that lots of their meetings were kind of ineffective. Someone was giving a presentation, and people started to ask questions, going back and forth. You know how it's a linear document, so it's kind of difficult to go back several slides, and it's also difficult for the presenter to know where you are if you suddenly have questions and stuff like that. And the other option is, of course, that you run the whole presentation and then you take the questions, but it takes a long time. And what they realized was that it's actually a question of mathematics and the brain. You can only cram so many words onto PowerPoint slides, but actually most humans read between 250 and 300 words per minute, which means that in 20 minutes, you can get a lot of more information into people. Just taking 20 minutes as a kind of, if we have a meeting for an hour, let's have a third of it, let's have 20 minutes for the PowerPoint presentation. It's always longer, right? Sometimes it's just a whole meeting, and nothing was done. So in 20 minutes, you can actually cram a lot of more information if you have them written as a narrative. And what happens also is that PowerPoint is very easy on the presenter, but hard on the audience. And a narrative is the opposite. You have to write a clear narrative. You have to think things through, right? Otherwise, it's not something you can read. And the argumentation, all the sub points, whatever, you have to have a clear way of describing it. And that's what they wanted. They wanted to have thoughts, proposals that were really thought through before they had a meeting. And then they did this fantastic thing of having, the first 20 minutes, people just sit down silently reading. Because really strange for people new to Amazon, and really strange meeting format for almost everyone, really awkward. But in those 20 minutes, people make notes in the memo. And then the next thing is that they someone would that has written a memo might perhaps go like, okay, so let's walk you through it. No, that's what everybody just did in their own head. So they just go through the notes. Everybody tells their notes, and the presenter kind of captures those, and then they have a discussion, the third part of the meeting, where people can drill down and ask questions about certain specific things, which they have issues with. And the task for the presenter is to remedy the notes, come back with a new version of the memo that everybody can accept. And they can go around, they can make 15 versions of these memos before they actually, but when everybody says, well, now we have a kind of accepted memo, that's the green light. That's when they go ahead and launch the product, if that's what the memo is about. So this is kind of a very effective and it's still at the base of operation at Amazon. They do this all the time, but it's also good. I mean, it's not actually, it's not a new thing, right? Before we had the computers and PowerPoint, we did exactly this thing. If you read memoirs of heads of state like with Churchill, and they wrote loads of memos, and that's how decisions got made, or proposals were made that then became decisions. So it's not like a new format, of course, but it's interesting to look at it from this perspective. And being a writer myself, I originally, or a lot of what I do, I have to express in the written format. I think it's quite true that with a clear narrative, you can get people, you move worlds much easier. So without further ado, let's see if I can actually share something here. Share screen. Oh, this is interesting.
Do we have a technical difficulty?
System preferences. Yes. Okay, see you soon.
I think he's to come out and come back in again to get his thing working. Yeah, that's not him actually. In the meantime, I've seen a preview of it already. So if he doesn't get it working, I can also share mine. There we go. I think he's back. So fingers crossed, it's going to work now.
That was
Magnus.
Pretty rapid.
Are you back with us?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you yet, but fingers crossed your share screen will work now. Here we go. Yeah, it's working.
Okay, so here we are in the kind of craft ambassador space. And we're on the start page of the template for the presentation memo or proposal memo, or whatever. You could obviously use it for whatever you like. So here, here's the development of it is you can read more articles, and I can also recommend a book called Working Backwards, which is written by two of the top executives that were in the S team when they did this, and also responsible for giving us the Kindle, the Amazon Prime, and Amazon Video, and they discuss at length how those things were developed using these tools. So what this is of course, now we need instead of handing out printouts, we need a digital version. And what is better than to do it in Craft? The first thing I want to say is that it's the 6-page memo, but what's interesting here is that that's the length of it. You don't have to. You can do whatever kind of division that suits your narrative. So what I've done is just to have an example of divisions that is quite common and effective. But obviously you can do whatever you like. The 6-page memo is just, it should not be longer, because then it takes longer than 20 minutes to read it. And then you have kind of failed in creating your concentrated narrative. So the first thing is the executive summary. And you just, what you do here is you ask your ask. You tell people exactly what it is you want to do. And why in one page, in 3-4 paragraphs. Then you look at what are the goals, and you start over from the beginning, from the executive summary. What is the intention? Why do you want to go in this direction? The proposal is heading. What is the challenge? What are you up against? And what is the ask for the organization? Which are the OKRs? And then you kind of look at what will you measure this against? How will you measure it going forward? And then you have background and data for those who, there could be market trends, it could be user behaviors, it could be changing market, whatever. Is there a gap or opportunity in the market? Are there requirements to be fulfilled before you can launch anything that are kind of, prerequisites and stuff like that? And then also you look at what to execute. So, okay, what are the next steps? And before that, there's a kind of a special section, which is a format that we work a lot with is the iceberg model, which could be used in itself, but it's also a smart thing to include in a proposal if you have developed a concept for whatever it is that you're proposing. And the iceberg model is pretty simple. It's like, it's only the tip of the iceberg that can be seen by customers, and it has to have the kind of attraction that draws them in, right? So in short, the tip of the iceberg is the elevator pitch, the mission statement, or whatever the promise that you give people that make them so interested that they want to know more. And the next level is the strategic feature and messages. I mean, this could be used for communications as well. And then you have maximum 4 or 5 strategic features and messages that you have in the model, and they are, the differentiating things that will make you stand apart and stand out and be attractive. And then you have also the support features or hygiene factors. So these features, the strategic features, how are they, what are they supported by? So this is an classic example of the iceberg model, which is nicely situated, used for describing the concept in this format, the memo format. And as a bonus, this is actually the memo doesn't include the PR FAQ, but that's another Amazon format, and which is quite simplistic. And this is this is how they work backwards, and how many other people do too in the digital development industry as well. The PR FAQ is just basically this. You have to write the PR, the press release that you would be able to release when you launch the product or the feature or whatever it is. So how would that press release sound? So here, this is how they've actually, the proposal for the Kindle was written as such a press release. And what happens is that you have to, because the working backwards is about working backwards from the dream customer experience or the desired customer experience. And the press release then states that dream customer experience. And the FAQ is actually also interesting because this future press release is accompanied by the FAQ that you also have to write if you launch that product. And they do an internal FAQ and an external FAQ. So these are the questions and answers that people will have internally about this feature or product or concept. And then also the external, what will customers say? What would they ask? What will be kind of what are the questions that customer service will have to handle if we release this product? And using this format, is quite, as you can see, it's not taking up a lot of space. It's not something very complicated, but that's also, of course, the whole idea behind it, that you are basically explaining and expressing on an idea level, and a very clear and concrete such idea level. So here, just for making it convenient, it's included in the memo template, but usually they are used separately. Like the memo is one thing and the PR FAQ is another document, but I thought it would be convenient to have them in the same template. You can, of course, break them out and use them any way you like. Yeah.
Cool.
Questions?
Awesome. Thanks so much, first of all, for the presentation, Magnus. And this has been a work in progress for like a month or so already. So I'm super excited that we're finally able to share it. And with the latest able to duplicate, people can literally duplicate this and use it for their own. So I'm excited to make this in the wild. I will open up to any questions. So if anyone wants to jump on screen or throw a question in chat, feel free. But just before, I've got a question of my own just while we're waiting, Magnus. So this is something that you guys actually use within your company, right? You guys use this, is it to pitch to clients, or how do you guys use this within your own company?
Yeah, we use it to pitch to clients, to present proposals instead of presenting them in PowerPoints. As Amazon was right. This is much more effective, and it's also, especially in this world of remote work, which the pandemic also ushered in. We were working remotely before that, but now it's much more common and much more accepted among other organizations and companies than the pure digital developers. And of course, this is so easy to because Craft is such a nice document format to share. It's excellent to send to clients or collaborators, or also, of course, internally. That's where it starts. This is I guess it comes from the whole idea of turning away from slide after slide, and instead forcing yourself to actually create a narrative.
Yeah, it's good. I think, like you said, it forces us to think deeper when often we have a surface level glimpse at things nowadays. I think that we've got 2 questions, and then we'll move on to the next one. Chance, did you have a question? I see you raised your hand. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I did want to say something. I really, really loved how you organize things. I organize things in a very similar fashion when sharing notes. I used to be a facilitator for a genetics course last semester, and we had a whole bunch of slew of notes that we'd like to share with points of each lecture. I wanted to ask 2 questions. The first one, I saw that you have a nice cover photo for each section that you go in. Is there a reason, just philosophically, why you don't have images embedded in between the sections? And if you do embed these photos, are you drawing a lot of attention to this in like that you have them sized out really big or fit to screen, or how does that work with images?
Thank you. The images that we use within the memo are often, concept dependent, right? So it's totally okay to pepper the memo with other images as well, but again, not to distract from the narrative, but to add to the narrative. So, for instance, it's again, in opposition or whatever, as alternative to PowerPoint, it's you could have an image of statistics that supports your case, or is for instance in the section about customer behavior. It might be as Edward Tufte would have said, it much faster and easier to tell the story with a graph plus a headline. So of course we go ahead and do that. More like a regular article would look like, right? Or a paper, whatever you would like to call it, and so there's no boundaries there. Just the thing that but but bear in mind then if you use a lot of images within the text area, then you have to think about the length, of course. And yeah, but again, this is something that Craft is so beautiful, how obviously you can look in the community and there's, it could be even easier to fiddle with images, but with that said, it looks beautiful without fiddling as well.
Thanks. And Chance, do you have one more question?
Yes, the second question there is, I oftentimes find that the easiest way to share is like directly from the web, mostly for the comment feature. I love that you can comment on each individual block. And you were talking earlier about how you'd have your note and then you'd give people some time to write up and leave some comments on the note. Do you find yourself, if you're presenting or anything like this, that you're presenting straight from your computer from your craft, or do you share a secret link and then have them comment individually on that? That way, you can see public comments, or what's your go-to share ability on that?
Space collaborators for internal and secret links for external with comments on, so they can comment. And then, then you have a session about the comments, and again, like the quiet time in the Amazon meeting, everybody has had their quiet time, right? So we can have when we have a meeting, we can start right at the comments. So it's really effective in that way as well, in terms of process.
Brilliant. I think there's one more question about this, then we'll move on to the next presenter. Flogrow actually asked, does everyone use this template? I assume maybe in your company or something, or are you the pioneer? Are others starting to adopt it as well?
Well, actually, everybody uses a format that is this format. That's why I made the template, basically. So everybody does that, but going back, obviously people used Word and then Dropbox paper, which is also very easy to share and well, and have comments. But so everybody used the format, and now people are looking to Craft and see that like Dropbox paper, it's a very shareable and easy format to work in, especially if you compare to Word, and you don't have the limits of having the printed page as your metaphor, right? And that what we're finding when we're interactive with both our colleagues and clients, that most of them are younger than I am, so we're not used to reading the printed page, right? So it's much more like if you share a proposal like this, the experience of consuming it is much more like our everyday digital experience of the web, the blog, or whatever. So that's a huge advantage too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And a big digital round of applause for you. That was a really cool presentation. And we'll make sure the link to this template is shared both on YouTube in the comments or in the description, and also on Slack as well. So thanks so much for the presentation, Magnus.
Thanks for having me.
I think maybe Peter, if you want to come up next, I know yours is not business focused at all. I think you've got a personal way of using Craft. So if you want to come up and share your Craft, that'd be fantastic.
So thank you, Tom, for inviting me, and Magnus, that was a great presentation. I have, being from Seattle, I have several friends that work at Amazon, and it's legendary. The methodology that you described is legendary, and arguably one of the most effective meeting formats in history, if you just judge it by their valuation. But what's hilarious about this presentation, or this part, is I'm actually going to give you a PowerPoint presentation. So I guess we could have coordinated a little bit better, but at least it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. There's only a few slides and more pictures than words. So as Tom mentioned, I use Craft for my personal life, as many of us do. I use it for work, but I also use it in kind of a unique way with a friend of mine who lives across the country. We have a shared workspace. You could see my screen, Tom. We're all set there. So, so let me introduce you to Preston. This is my buddy. He lives in Seattle. I'll get to that in a minute. We have a lot in common. We both have families. We both love to play golf, and we're both Christians. And I'm not going to turn this into a long religious presentation, but it factors into how we use craft. And the problem is that, even though we're great friends, we live really far from each other. I live in Boston. I'm originally from Seattle, but he lives in Seattle. Of course, that's where we met. And, we both have jobs and families and obligations. And so as life got busier, it's harder to stay in touch. I don't know if your experience is like mine, but often I will be, maybe in the car or something, and I'll go, oh, who should I call? Who haven't I spoke to in a while? And that's great. And it's a great way to keep in touch with folks. But, Preston and I are very similar. We have a lot of similar interests, and we wanted to find a way to keep in touch a little more intentionally. And so during COVID, when I had stopped traveling for business, I wasn't going to Seattle as much to see him, we decided to start a Bible study group. A Bible study group it can take many forms, but for us, it's basically one of us, we take turns throughout the week. One of us will think of or read something in the Bible, something will jump out at me, and I'll go, oh, that might be interesting. I'll kind of do a little more research on it, and then I'll write something up and then present a lesson to him and me. And it's very organic. It's not structured. It's like, this is what I thought. What do you think? And that's the great thing about the Bible or the Quran or whatever it is you're reading. It's totally open to your interpretation. And that's the beautiful thing about faith, is that you apply your own values and your own knowledge to it. And it can become something greater than just the words on the page. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is become better human beings and fathers, better husbands, all of the reasons why you might want to, dig a little deeper. So we started using craft for this. We created a craft space called God's Marines. And it's just two of us in there. Actually, we're inviting a third. But we use craft because it was really perfect for keeping track of lesson notes, things that we wanted to, take into the week. And you can go back in time and go, oh yeah, when was it we studied that? Oh yeah, that's what we talked about that week, that kind of thing. You can see from my dates that sometimes we're better sometimes than others about meeting weekly. Life comes up, kids have soccer games, things happen, and we, or maybe we just didn't record it in craft, but we may even put a bullet list in there of who we're praying for this week, people in our life that are going through a tough time, and we're just thinking about them and trying to keep them in our, in the forefront of our mind. So that's how we use craft and continue to use craft. But then we sort of just, again, organically added another dimension, and it's what I'm calling the weekly prompt. So the weekly prompt is, it's a random topic. It could be about faith. It could be about a paradoxical value problem that you're experiencing. It could be about your relationship, or it could just be about something current event. But the idea is, it's a creative writing prompt, essentially. A lot of times these come to me, I'm listening to the radio and I go, oh, that's interesting. And I think, oh, that would be something interesting to discuss. So it's a single sentence and it gets put in craft, and I'll usually text them and say, hey, new prompt in craft. The point is, go and answer this asynchronously. Everybody's busy. So the idea is, when you can carve out 5 or 10 minutes, spend time reflecting and then write your answer to the prompt. Examples of prompts we have used. If you could change one thing about the way you were raised, what would it be? Write about the first time you saw your wife. Name a movie that you watched. What was the best dinner you ever had? These are open-ended questions that anybody basically can answer, but in the process, everybody who writes has the choice. They can say, I I remember I was 15 and went to McDonald's and it was amazing. Okay, you could do that, something kind of vapid. Or you could really go into talking about, you know, a meal that you shared with somebody in your life that was really important and what was going on in your life, and, you know, demonstrate some vulnerability and, you know, and really show up authentically. Because it's open-ended, the writer gets the choice. All right. Now, Preston and I know each other, and I feel like I know him. I've really gotten to know him even better than I thought I could through this process, because I understand how he writes and he knows me. So, you know, we're both very authentic. Let me just say that. You know, we'll air our dirty laundry, and I don't have to worry about, you know, putting on any airs or anything like that. So it's a very they're intentionally brief and open-ended, and then the response, there's no expectation about response. Maybe it's a paragraph, maybe it's a novel, it could be any of that. And then it sort of grew to the point where I started to having to roll them up into some super meta document, right? And you can see, you know, we kind of grouped them in two different formats, you know, like these are the just for fun stuff, you know, prompts that randomly came up that he put in or I put in. And then stuff that's really more tied to our faith on the right. Moonlight Sonata. This was one of my favorite ones. This was his idea. He said, close your eyes. Everybody knows Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, right? Very famous piece. Close your eyes, listen to the entire first movement. Now write. And the interesting thing about that way that turned out is, I mean, he wrote something completely different. He was World War II, Winston Churchill, and sitting there thinking about, what do I do? You know, we're being shellacked. And, I mean, he went from a completely different perspective. And I was in France thinking about some woman staring off a balcony on an empty street. I mean, that's the power of music. And that's the great thing about having an open-ended prompt like that. So what's the point of all this? I don't really know. We could make a book for our kids. We've talked about this, you know, like, you know, it kind of like, hey, someday we compile all these, put them into a book, and then hand it to our kids and say, hey, if you really want to know who your dad is, read this, because these are the conversations that we probably would have just never happened, but you're going to get a really good insight into who I was or who I am as a person. Obviously it's free therapy. That's great. You know, you're sitting there and, you know, because you show up next week and you talk about, hey man, I read your craft and that was pretty insightful, or I didn't know that about you, or I could see that's, you know, something that you're struggling with. How can I help you, kind of thing. So free therapy is always good. Obviously it's a way to keep in touch with each other. I guess I would just say from a personal perspective, journaling and creative writing, Magnus talked about this in his presentation about how he is inclined to write. And for some people, it comes easier than others. And I respect that. For me, it does come easy to write. And I find that if I am able to take a moment and reflect on the thoughts, really think deeply about something for 5 or 10 minutes, it gets them from swirling in the head to on digital paper. As I said, Tom, in our last presentation, maybe we never even go back to those things, you know, but the point is that they're not here anymore. They're somewhere. And I think it's really therapeutic to do that. Also, no matter how ugly the truth is, it helps you create a meaningful and lasting connection with somebody. So I've talked about this with friends and they said, wow, that's interesting. I'd love to do that too, that kind of thing too. I do have a demonstration, a craft demonstration, because Magnus shared his, so I'm going to do mine too. I wanted to just show you one that we have done here. I'm just going to bring up another screen. So this is our space here, and as I said, you know, we got our kind of our roundup and stuff like that. But this was a prompt that, can you see my screen, or is it too small? We good?
It's a little small. If you can do like full screen, maybe it might do the best option, I think.
Does Craft have the opportunity to zoom?
If you're on
yet.
Sharing mode, like if you shared the link, you can sometimes zoom in, but I think that might be okay.
Well, I can talk about this anyway. So this was a prompt that came to me. Again, I'm driving to work and I'm thinking, oh, you know, I don't know what came up, but the prompt was, it's called the soundtrack of your life. And the prompt was, make a Spotify playlist or Amazon Music, if that's your thing, for the soundtrack of your life. And then write about why you chose to include each song. Now I remember what was happening is I was driving down the road and a song came on that often does happen. It took me right back to middle school, and I was like, oh, I totally remember what was going on in my life. And this is so interesting. What would the rest of the songs be like if I were to do this chronologically? So that was the prompt. And again, it's very open-ended. There's no rules about it. So my format, of course, not surprisingly, turned out to be different than his. I broke mine into sort of eras, like when I was the first 4 years of my life and the first songs that my mother played in the house. And, here are the album covers. And these are songs that are close to me because my mom played them. And so it brought back a memory. And then I went into elementary school, and then my dad, listening to my dad with my dad playing basketball. And then I get into Tears for Fears because, one of the greatest bands of the 80s. I mean, you're not gonna, and if you're my age, you remember these things. A lot of folks are younger, but the idea was, just throwing up like this entire playlist, and you can see, sorry, I've embedded that at the top here so you can listen to it. That just is like a flood of memories, song after song after song. And it was this took a long time, by the way. This was not one of those little 5-minute, I'm in the middle of something. This was like, wow, I really got into it and researched it. Well, not surprisingly, so did he. He built one for every year of his life, one song for every year of his life. Okay. And again, we did it like an album drop so that mine was done first. And I said, I'm not going to share mine until you share yours. And so he was like working on his a little longer. And then we both dropped them into the craft space at the same time and both listened to each other's playlist and both read. And I'm going to tell you, man, some of the memories that he has and the stories, this is him growing up and all that stuff. It just totally blew me away. And I thought, what an awesome project this was, just in self-reflection, to be able to go back in time and have that long playlist. It's a flood. It's song after song after song that takes you right back. So that was just one example of how we use craft to collaborate and kind of learn a little bit more about each other. And I guess I'll stop there and take any questions you have.
I mean, I absolutely love that idea. Like the first time you told me about it in the first email we exchanged, like it's the most innovative, one of the most innovative ways of using craft that I've seen so far. And I love the idea right from the beginning. We did have a couple of questions, actually. I'll start with Magnus asked first. He said, is this only with that one friend, or do you have other friends that you do this with in different spaces?
I mentioned that we're inviting a third person into our Bible study group, and again, it's a friend that we have known, and it's a bit intimidating because he's also a pastor of a church that I go to. So here I am showing up with the Bible study, and then you got a guy who's an actual Bible scholar in the group. So I'm a little intimidated, but the promise that I made to Mike is, I promise you will not have to plan Bible study, because all he does all week long is plan Bible studies for thousands of people. So, we'll take the load off of him. But we are inviting him. He's a great guy, and it's going to be great. I think chemistry is really important when you're thinking about something with your faith. Okay. So I'm just separating this discussion. If you're doing a faith group, no bigger than 6. I mean, at that point, too many people, too many ideas, too many interpretations, the conversation starts to break down, and also people feel less inclined to be vulnerable because they're like, this is a bigger group and I don't know how people are going to take it. So in my opinion, having a small group is really, if you want to build a meaningful and lasting connection with people who can be with you and walk through life with you, okay, it's better to keep it small. Now, the idea of having a creative writing group in a space, I haven't really thought about that. And I thought, that's a great idea. I could certainly throw it out there and say, hey, here's the template. Everybody put in what you want. I think it's a great idea. Do a Zoom once a week, once every couple of weeks, and loop back together and say, hey, I really enjoyed reading that about you, Magnus. That was really cool.
Yeah, I love that. Sam had a question too. Sam asked, do you still call this friend regularly and talk, or has this kind of replaced your verbal communication?
That's a great question. Well, we do have a standing, because it's a standing meeting, and time zones do make it tricky. I'm not gonna lie. He's just getting off of work when I'm already into the night, so that is a bit of a challenge. but we do text. We have a text thread. We talk on the phone. It hasn't replaced it. If anything, it's really augmented it. It's made it better because there's when we have a conversation, it's now, it's taking what I had written and going, man, I read that. And I mean, I had no idea that was your experience with your dad. And, wow, but again, that means that I shared something that I would not have normally shared having a beer with a guy, right? Yeah. I wrote something really personal and I put it out there, and you never know. You take a risk. You never know how that's going to be interpreted. Maybe he goes, oh geez, that's over the line for me. You know what I mean? Sure. But it hasn't replaced it. If anything, it's made it really much better.
Cool. And I think it's also important that it's got to be the right people, right? Some people wouldn't like this. They wouldn't get on with this kind of idea. So the right people will probably really adopt this idea just like you guys have. And it's actually enhanced your friendship. Just before we wrap up with you then, any other questions for Peter at all? Anybody live? You can put it in the text box. You can come on screen, whatever you want.
I saw Esme's comment about how they couldn't pick a single song. It is tough. That particular project, which by the way, I encourage you to do this. I encourage everybody to do this. I think it was so much fun to do this because music is it can just take you there, right? And it's universal, and it's something that almost everybody, I guess, can get into. But man, curating that over time and going, am I going to pick Michael Jackson's Thriller, or is that not going to make the cut? That is tough because I played that album 2 years in a row and didn't stop. You know what I mean? It is very difficult, but I think it's also a lot of fun. I think, you're really going to dive into that memory. And I have had so much fun playing that playlist, on my drive to work now, because it's just memory after memory after. It's like I'm reliving my life in a 45-minute drive. It is so
pure nostalgia.
Fascinating.
Awesome. I think we did have one last question actually from Flo. Did you think about using these kind of questions with your partner? I think was his question. Just correct me if I messed it up, Flo, but did you think about using these kind of things with partners as well?
Like with my wife?
I think so.
So I will answer it that way. So my wife, she doesn't write writing doesn't come as naturally to her. We do use craft to keep our notes about the kids, things that we need to work on. If she's at the doctor and needs our insurance card, it's there. So there is that sort of, we do collaborate in that space just to, as like you're running a family, there's a business here, you've got stuff you're sharing all the time. And it's like, hey, I need the insurance card right now, or, hey, what's the kid's frequent flyer number, whatever, those kinds of things. So we do use it for that. But in terms of using it to ask those questions, it doesn't come as naturally to her to write as it does to speak. However, I have taken those questions, and when we do have a couple minutes together, which, busy life, kids, whatever, I do ask her that. The other day, I asked her a question from Craft, which was, think of one thing that we should do or a place we should go in the next 5 years. Tell me. And I asked that question because, you get busy and you start thinking about, you're just maintaining the status quo a lot of times. And you're driving a kid here, there, whatever. And you don't think about your future sometimes as a couple, as often as you should. And so it's it's aspirational and saying, hey, where should we go? What's a goal that we should try to accomplish together? So I have taken some of that inspiration from Craft and then applied it that way.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That was really, really good. And there's lots of people excited in the comments too. So thank you. And again, a digital round of applause for Peter. Esme, I think, would you like to come up next and share what you're doing? I think you've got a slightly different one again. We've had business, we've had personal, and we've almost got a knowledge management kind of things now. So Esme, if you're around still, do you want to come up on screen?
I've got a bit of everything, love. So if any of you have watched me on Slack for any length of time, you'll know that I use something called Dewey Decimal. Now, for those of you that don't know, oh my God, where have you been? So everybody knows, like, GTD by David Allen. The new one is PPV by August Bradley. There's all of these like ways to get things done, and you should time block, you should do this, you should do that, you should do something else, right? Everybody knows those. But there's one which flew under my radar, which is Johnny Decimal. Now, Johnny Decimal isn't a way to like organize your time. That's a lie, because I organize my time by Johnny Decimal. It's like it's a whole mindset shift, and it works on numbers, as you would think, with Johnny Decimal. He is on Twitter, and it's johnnydecimal.com, and there is a forum that he's on and everything else. So Johnny Decimal in its purest form is you have numbers from 0 to 100. That's it. And for each area of your life, you assign it a series of 10 numbers. So you have 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, and so on. And then within those areas, you have categories. So 20, 21, 22, 23, right? And it is literally just a way to like organize stuff. If I share my screen so that you've got some idea of what I'm talking about. Now, I use this everywhere, and I do mean everywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's Twitter, Dropbox, Google Calendar, Craft, Notion, Todoist, email, it doesn't matter. Everywhere uses the same system. Now, the thing that people, I find, sometimes get wrong with Johnny Decimal is they think that they have to have all the numbers in all the places. If you notice over here, mine doesn't start until 40. So 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, and 30 to 39 are not in Craft, purely because they don't need to be. I don't do anything for them inside Craft. However, Craft is the most gorgeous way for me personally to write my content. So I start mine at 40 to 49. 49 is content. It doesn't matter what it is. So 29 is content, 39 is content for both of my jobs. 49 for my content and 59 for my husband's content. He's a Twitch streamer. Content covers a broad range of things, so all of his live streams go into 59 on Google Drive, because we don't need to worry. We know where it's got to go. I have tried using a billion different types of organization, as I'm sure we all have at this point. The issue is that they're not universal. So if I'm on Dropbox, and I'm like, right, I need to find X thing. Well, where did I put it? Okay, so that's under sales. But on Google Drive, I would put it under merch, because it's the same thing, but it's labeled completely differently. What the Johnny Decimal system does is it removes all of that, because all you need to remember is numbers. And surprisingly enough, humans are ridiculously adept at remembering numbers. And I was as surprised as you are, because I don't do numbers. Esme does not do numbers. Esme does words. Esme does video. Esme does YouTube. Esme does not do numbers. But when we sat down and worked it out, we actually worked out that those are my numbers. And one of the things that I did when trying to work out numbers was I tried to match numbers. So a 0, something that ends in a 0, is always branding and assets. Always. Doesn't matter where it is. It's always branding and assets. A 1 is always people. Doesn't matter where it is. A 2 is always finance and legal, because it takes the guesswork out of where you put something. We've just commissioned somebody to do some artwork for his Twitch channel. I didn't have to wonder. Well, it goes into finance and legal. It's a contract. I didn't need to worry about that. I know full well it goes into 52 on Google Drive. There was no trying to remember where you put something. So when it comes to using it in craft, I have 49 is focus. So this is where I put all of the work, all of the articles that I'm working on currently go into 49 because it's content. Craft is a little bit different because I've added a decimal point and then 2 numbers. So we have focus, we have ideas, in progress, published, abandoned, because we all get stuff that we write about and then think, I'm not publishing that, and then research. So from here, I automatically know if I'm looking for a piece of content, it can only be in 49. There is no context switching. There is no wondering, where did I put that thing? Because everything, all of my articles get written in craft, because come on, guys. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, how could you not? So while everything gets drafted and written in craft, because why wouldn't you when it looks that good? My craft, and especially using the Johnny Decimal system, is part of a much, much larger whole. So we are aware that I am a huge proponent of not putting everything in one place. So while I draft and write and curate and spend hours in craft, writing my articles, scripting YouTube videos, writing my daily essays, things like that, it's not taken as a silo. It links to Todoist, it links to Notion. I am a huge proponent of Wavebox, which anybody who's seen me on Slack in the last couple of weeks will know. So when you use Johnny Decimal, the same as any system, I guess, but Johnny Decimal is the only one that I found that works with my brain, you never lose anything, because there's only so many places it can be. So I will write my content in 49. Well, I know that because 49 is content. When my husband goes live on Twitch, we know that that live stream needs to go into 59 because that's his content on Google Drive. I know if I'm tracking time for somebody, it needs to go into 21, or if I'm with a client, for me, it's 41. There is no wondering where anything should be if you spend some time sorting out your numbers. And as I've said, the big thing, the important note for me, use it in as many places as you can and it will become second nature really quickly. I was so shocked at, like, I was asked something and I'm like, oh yeah, and I knew exactly where to go. And I've been using the system for like 3 days. But it was such a mindset shift to always know where something is, and be able to find everything at the drop of a hat. But if you go into it thinking that every number has to be everywhere, you're going to end up with empty folders and empty boxes, and that's not good, and empty documents in craft. So yeah, so that is just a super quick how I'm using Johnny Decimal in craft and everywhere else.
Amazing. Thank you. I mean, first of all, it reminds me like a library, right? In a library, everything is documented really well, and you have these here and these here. It's like a personal way of organizing yourself, like a library. So that's awesome.
The problem that I've found, and this is a personal issue that I have, is a lot of people compare the Johnny Decimal system with the Dewey Decimal system. The biggest issue with that, because I'm ex-librarian, the biggest issue with that is the fact that the Dewey Decimal system was created by a colonialist in the mid-1800s. So no offense to anybody, but the Christianity section is huge and other religions have like this much space. So there's a mass thing going on at the moment for decolonizing libraries to make to bring it up to like 2022, because things have changed slightly. But yeah, it's just a way of cataloging your brain, essentially. And yeah, if you use it everywhere, oh my God.
Sounds brilliant. Are there any questions live for us, mate? Either in the chat, or if you want to come on screen?
It is similar to Para, Joe, but it's not, because Para to me is like, so Para, projects, areas, resources, archives. It doesn't work for me, because I need to have like job 1 Para, job 2 Para, and then I'm like, oh, where did I put that thing? But it's horses for courses. It's finding out what works for you. I have tried everything. I couldn't get anything to work. And it was somebody on, I'm sure it was someone on Slack who said Johnny Decimal, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And like went down the rabbit hole.
It wasn't long ago, was it? Is it maybe less than a month ago that you did this?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. But now, like, all of my projects in Toggle have numbers in front of them, because I know when I'm tracking for a certain person on a certain client, it's 24. I know that.
So Sam had a question. Do you ever want to go above 100? Would there be any need to go above 100 if you had enough content?
So strict, and I mean strict, Johnny Decimal only goes up to 99, right? And so for me, 40 is my brand, 50 is my husband's brand, 60 is myself and my husband. So like we've got one for Lush that we like, because why wouldn't you? And like meals that we like, and places that we like, and films we want to buy, and all things like that. And then 70 to 79 is family. Then we have house and car, and then we have tech for 90 to 99. Strictly, there shouldn't be any need to go over 100. However, if you need to, you can start at 001. And if you just add a 0 in front, then you can go past 100. There's also a rule that you shouldn't go more than 2 folders deep. Well, that does not work for me. That does not work for me, because for Zoom calls, when I'm on Zoom calls with clients, I will have the number that they are, and then so like the area, so say 20, and then 21, and then the year, and then so the basic premise of JD is that you shouldn't go more than 2 down. That does not work for me, and I wasn't prepared to spend 18 million years going through Google Drive and making it work.
Makes sense. And that actually comes on very nicely to Magnus's question. He said, how long did it take you to implement? Because obviously there must have been a lot of moving around and changing. How long did it take? Really
not. Really, I was surprised, because I'm like, this is like overhauling my entire system, yet a weekend. Okay. Because once you've, it really is. Because once you've got the big numbers, so once I knew that everything to do with me and my brand was 40 to 49, you just drag and drop things, because you know that's where it should be. And it was just literally a weekend. And then you'll go into a new app, and you'll go, oh, I haven't opened that for a while. There's no Johnny Decimal. And then it'll take you about 10 minutes to organize it into like how you need it to look, because you already know your numbers. And it literally, I mean, bless him, my husband was there like, oh God, she's found something else. I'm not going to pay attention, bless him, but he's like, I'm not even going to give it attention, because she'll like go on to something else in a minute. And the other day he was like, oh, so this goes into 59. And I'm like, who are you? So, but he knows his number for content is 59, because you only need to remember one number.
Sure. I think we've got one more question, and we might need to wrap up. I think we're at the end of the hour. Joe had another question. What about things that feel like they fit in multiple places?
Okay, so that is a tough one. However, right, the way that I look at it is the first place that you look for it is the place that it should be, right? Counts for kitchen cabinets as well. If you're not sure where the ladle is, and you look in a drawer and it's not there, when you find it, put it back in that drawer, because that's where you assumed it should be. So that's how I work on it. And if it should be in 2 places, you've only got to search 2 places to find it. You haven't got to search the entirety of your Google Drive to try and find something, because you're like, did I put it in branding and assets, or did I put it in finance and legal? There's only 2 places to check. There's no guesswork. That's how I get around it.
Makes sense. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's you know, I love when you first shared it with me, I thought it was really, really cool. So thank you so much for sharing it to the wider community as well. Everyone listening in, I think that's all we've got time for today. Sorry, Joe, I think you're supposed to do it as well, but maybe you can come back another session and share your craft as well. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat. We've actually got one in a week's time, next Thursday. We do have Chance, who's on this call, doing a craft for students session, which is a little insight into his craft and how he's been using craft for his studies this past few semesters. Super excited to see that. So that's next Thursday. And we'll be doing these showcase your crafts regularly. So if you guys have anything you'd like to share, whether it's something unique like these guys have shared today or something else you've been doing, please feel free to get in touch. And we'll be putting these on every few weeks. So thanks so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your days, evenings, months, years, and everything else. And I'll see you guys very soon. Take care, everyone.